An unknown voice in the dark night said that from today, his new name is Zero. And the embryo organization is his new home and new homeland, and he must also forget about his past. The guy must become the most dedicated member of the organization. And to do everything in the interests of the organization, he has nothing to hide from them, and his only task is to carry out the orders of the organization. A guy chained to a chair must be ready to give his life in the name of the organization. The unknown doctor told the test subject that even if he becomes a scarecrow, he must carry out any assignment. A girl with red hair standing next to the doctor asked to answer her question. She asked to tell her name. The experimental guy opened his eyes and thought about who he was. His name used to be Stan. Before he was transferred here, he was a game booster. In a past life, Stan sat at the computer and told his boss on the phone that he would upgrade him to platinum without any problems. He was that godless booster, and on the one hand, he did this to feed himself. On the other hand, Stan did it because he loved to play and win. A strange little elf suddenly approached his in-game character with a book and asked him to stay. The elf introduced himself as an electorate reporter named Henry, and he was eager to do a quick interview with the guy. Stan smiled sweetly and agreed to give a short interview. Henry was surprised that the guy agreed to this so easily. Never before had such a mysterious fighter agreed so easily. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by Stan waving in front of the elf's face and asking what he wanted from him. Henry opened his book and began his interrogation. He said that Stan took 47th place in the current tournament, and as you know, those who took the first 100 places are the strongest and most qualified participants, and he would like to know if he has any plans to join the military service. To the guy's surprise, Stan answered very briefly. He answered no. Henry was wondering what was the reason for the guy's refusal to join the military service. Stan replied that this was a secret, and now he needed to talk about a completely different thing, and only then talk about plans. The guy approached the cameraman so that his face could be better seen in the frame. Suddenly, Stan greeted everyone and began to advertise his booster services, saying that he could easily earn them currency and boost them. Before he could finish speaking, Henry shouted that boosters were prohibited by the moderators, and they couldn't show it on air. Stan was disappointed that again he was unable to make free advertising, and Henry understood why there was no information about the player before. Stan from the real world took off his virtual reality glasses. He didn't understand what was wrong with boosting because he was better than any pro player. This year, the guy boosted more than 10 accounts, and he even managed to get into the top players. The game in which he boosts is called Star Sea, and more than 10 million people play it. You can get to space, Earth, and other locations of the vast starry sea using virtual reality gaming devices with which you are completely immersed. Being one of the very first testers and later a fan of this game, Stan spent more than 10 years in it. Every task, every location, and even the location of the smallest crystals is more real for Stan than the dull world outside. The guy was distracted from his thoughts by the phone, in which the boss issued a new order. Stan saw that it was an order for a newbie and considered it easy. It's time to get to work and not complain about life. Then he thought that this new life would be simple and boring. Stan moved into the virtual world, where a voice was heard saying that this was the 24th test sample, and he was being injected with a serum called Valkyrie. Reaction: after 2 minutes 46 seconds, the sample came to life. Stan heard strange sounds of a siren, and for some reason the guy smelled something burning. His head was just pounding, and the guy didn't recognize the place he was in. It didn't look like the usual place of resurrection. Suddenly, Stan saw a scientist who shouted that the sample had come to life, and that it was urgent to inform Mrs. Hell. The scientist took the radio and ordered the guards to come and immediately take control of the sample. Stan was surprised that the guards showed up. This was a slightly unusual start to the game. The guy didn't understand what was happening, but he knew for sure that it was better to run away from here as quickly as possible. However, the hero did not have time to escape because one of the guards hit him with his plastic sword. Stan blocked the blow, but there was something wrong here. For some reason, he felt 100% pain, when the limit is 40%. In such a situation, it is worth disconnecting from the game as soon as possible. However, before he had time to pass out, they hit him again right there behind him, and this time the guy was taken under control. Stan woke up in a metal chamber, his hand still itching from the previous blow. Stan was angry because he paid the developers $300, but apparently the game broke again. But since it's a new account, it's easier to start over. But when he called the system, the guy couldn't believe his eyes. There was no exit button, only information on the player's characteristics. Stan was a commoner with minor injuries who had the ability Focus, which allowed him to learn 10% faster and create items. It was also written there that Stan is an NPC model of the first version, and there are 358 days left before the opening of the game. The guy ended up 10 years ago. Behind the system, the guy saw a mirror in which his game character was, whose face was exactly like Stan's in the real world. And then he realized that he had moved. Stan had moved completely into the starry sea. At that same second, the door to his metal cell opened, and he saw the silhouettes of people. A red-haired girl stood in front of him and asked if the guy was the test sample. She introduced herself as Hell's leader and said that if he tried to escape again, he would die. Stan recognized her as the Scarlet Cobra Hell, the boss of the Rookie Killer version 1.0, nicknamed Sister Destroyer. Hell, meanwhile, ordered the soldier to send the hostage for a blood test. She wants to see the results right now. The hero was lifted from the floor and taken for tests, and he kept thinking about where he was. Hell was the lady of the aquamarine star, and judging by the costumes of the local guards, Stan realized that this was the embryo organization of the initial versions of the Star Sea. Now he understood where he was. This was Valkyrie's laboratory, where a plan for the development of super-strong warriors was created. An insane organization whose goal is to destroy the government. According to the script, he is supposed to be brainwashed and then sent to the battlefield like a mindless piece of trash. This is a really shitty start. After some time, the scientist looking at Stan said that the blood test did not reveal any features, and it seemed that the period of his temper had already ended. The main effect of the essence is brain stimulation. The scientist wanted to open the guy's skull because he was sure that brain analysis would provide more information. But Hell forbade doing this because Stan was the first living specimen, and there was no point in destroying him yet. The scientist was disappointed, but agreed and said that in this case it would be worth observing the experimental subject. Hell bowed her head and told the doctor to send him for a brain cleaning first. Security grabbed Stan and took him to be cleaned. At that moment, the guy realized that he had finished his game. After all, he is only the first level, a weakling. The guards around him are at least level 5, and some even level 8. The worst thing is that Boss Hell is here, and therefore the guy simply has no chance of escaping. But Stan was not going to give up. He had to somehow figure out how to avoid cleaning, and then he saw a bookshelf. On it was a list of literature for laboratory assistants, and then the hero came up with a plan. When the guards escorted him past the bookshelf, the guy immediately grabbed one of the books. At that very second, they put machine guns to his head and ordered him to stop. But the doctor stopped the soldiers, saying that he wanted to see what the test subject would do. Stan realized that the plan had worked. Now the most important thing was not to appear dangerous to them. The guy opened the book he took and flipped through a few pages. These were the basics of mechanization, and the system window that appeared reported that the guy had begun to study the basic concepts of mechanization. Stan was surprised that the system worked, even though he is now an NPC, but he has a player system. This means that he can raise levels like a real player, no matter what he does. It will seem to scientists that these are the learning characteristics of the test sample. The head of the teachings was surprised that the guy was reading a book. Apparently, the serum enhanced his learning abilities. Hell was delighted with the unexpected success. If he becomes a brilliant fighter, then their cannon fodder will increase in price. However, it was necessary to go for brain cleaning because the equipment was already ready, so one of the guards told Stan to stop. But the guy did not let go of the book. Then the guard tried to force it out of Stan's hands. The hero held on until the last, and because of such strength the book was torn, however, the guy managed to finish reading it and increase his level. The system reported that he had learned the skills of a mechanic, the knowledge tree of a mechanic was opened, and the guy received several stat points and received the profession of a novice mechanic. A few minutes later, our hero was brought into the office to clear his mind. The doctor informed Mrs. Hell that they could begin. They sat Stan on a chair and tied him tightly, connecting the equipment to his head. Smiling, the doctor said that he was very sorry because this sample was very unusual. What if they ruined it right now? After all, it would have been better to first carry out an autopsy before cleaning it. Listening to this, Stan thought that the scientist was just a pervert if he wanted to delve into his brain so much. Hell told the scientist that they did not have time and needed to start immediately. The doctor agreed, because sooner or later the sample would fall into his hands. Wishing the guy good luck, the doctor turned all the devices to maximum. At that same second, powerful discharges of current began to cause damage to Stan's brain. The pain was unbearable. The system reported about the danger. It said that Stan should make a decision. His willpower is equal to 8 units, and his will is not enough to stop. In 15 seconds, the guy's brain will be erased. Stan knew that in order to avoid the brain purge, he needed 10 units of free determination, and then he remembered that he had previously raised the level. The hero ordered the system to add 2 free points to intelligence, and the system responded that it was restarting the solution. But Stan did not have time to wait. After a couple of seconds, the system counted the guy's points and reported that he had successfully avoided the brain cleansing. The equipment turned off. Stan was shaking, but was glad that he had time. Then he would just have to play along with them. Hell and the doctor have already approached the guy. It's time to test Stan's acting skills. The gorgeous girl slowly leaned towards Stan's face. She began to whisper to him that from today on he will be called Zero. Organization. The embryo is his home and his homeland. He must forget about his past. Meanwhile, Stan was only thinking that the red viper Hell was too close to him. She was very beautiful next to him. The guy had missed her so many times before. But now there is no need to think about it, because the situation is too dangerous. Stan must not look or move, endure, but not reveal himself. Hell finished whispering in the guy's ear and asked him who he was. The guy was silent for a long time, and the doctor thought that the flushing had failed, although he had done everything according to the standard. Suddenly, the guy began to speak, and the doctor and Hell drew his attention. Stan looked up and told them his name was Zero. The doctor explained that the essence of the Valkyrie enhanced Zero's ability to learn. The side effects of the essence may worsen his emotional relationship with others. The girl suggested that the experiment was a failure, however. The man replied that, on the contrary, it was a success. After all, cannon fodder doesn't need feelings, and Stan meanwhile smiled and thought that in no case would he become cannon fodder. Hell ordered the guards to take the guy to the recreation area. The guard apologized and said that the recreation room for experimental samples was not ready yet. Then the girl ordered the guy to be taken to her room because her management had handed him over to her care. Stan did not expect such a turn of events. He did not expect that he would go to the girl's room. He needed to discard all vulgar thoughts. A few minutes later, the guy was in Hell's room, and the thought that he would live with such a girl in the same room made his pants feel tight. Meanwhile, Hell was communicating with someone on the phone. She reported that the brain cleansing was successful. The girl was personally present at it. The voice from the receiver said that now it was time to train him. Suddenly, the girl told the boss that she would like to see her sister. Stan had been eavesdropping all this time and was surprised that the girl said about her sister. But a little later, he remembered that Hell had a sister. The voice from the receiver said that their agreement was not like that. She was allowed to visit her sister once every 2 months. There was no need to cross the line. Then the boss hung up, and the girl was shaking with rage. Stan noticed this and sympathized. Suddenly, Hell hit the wall, splashing out all the pain and rage on her. From such a blow, the wall immediately cracked. Stan had already forgotten that this beauty is very strong. Suddenly, the guy saw that Hell began to unfasten her belt, on which the weapon hung. Stan fell into a stupor. Right now, the beauty began to undress in front of the guy, completely exposing her body. The girl noticed that he was looking at her, and the guy guiltily looked away at that moment. Suddenly, she approached Stan, but the guy guessed that most likely he was not allowed to do this. Hell tried to seduce the guy, but he had to hold on because if she realized that he was not brainwashed, then he would be finished. After a couple of seconds, the girl turned around sharply, and Stan exhaled with relief. She went to her room, just a little more, and the guy wouldn't have been able to resist. After some time, the girl fell asleep. Only now Stan realized that there was only one bed in this room. What kind of strange games this lady was up to. So, apparently the guy needs to sleep with her. He quietly lay down on the bed next to Hell. At that same second, the girl kicked him, causing Stan to fall off the bed. Naturally, the bed belongs only to her, and the guy must sleep on the floor. By morning, the guy was brought to the training pavilion, where Hell was already waiting for him. From today, his training in combat skills, hand-to-hand combat and shooting begins. Hell threw some kind of device to the hero and told him to put it on. By pressing the button, Stan was enveloped in armor, but before he had time to react, he was immediately kicked in the chest. The girl did not stop and grabbed his hand. Pulling her hand, she immediately blocked it. In this position, it is easy to break a limb. She then kicked him in the chest, causing the guy to start bleeding from his mouth. As a result, the great booster lost and lay exhausted on the ground. Hell ordered him to get up. The guy got up and the fight was repeated, exactly the same as the first. The hero simply received many blows to the face. The system that appeared reported that the hero had trained by 5%, and Stan was convinced that although he was an NPC, he was capable of raising the level and learning new skills as a player. Thanks to this, the guy will soon be able to become the strongest character in this world. Hell left, and in her place another figure appeared, who ordered the guy to get up. He was approached by a bearded man who said that he was his new shooting mentor and the deputy head of this base, Justin. After these words, the man immediately threw the gun to Stan. He said that there are 10 bullets inside the gun. You need to aim at the target's heads. Stan was surprised that from the very beginning he was given such a difficult task. Only Olympic champions could cope with this. The guy raised the pistol and tried to hit the targets. But all the bullets that flew out of the pistol flew past. Stan never hit, although there was nothing unusual because he was not yet strong enough, and his characteristics were too low. Suddenly, Justin plunged a dagger into the guy's hand. Stan immediately grabbed his hand. from which blood poured out. Why did this abnormal man do this? Justin licked the dagger with blood and said that they would repeat the shooting over and over again, and every time the guy did not complete the task, he would pierce him with a dagger. He was wondering how much blood the guy would lose today. Stan clenched his fists. This man was just crazy, but the hero did not want to give up. He wanted to defeat him now, but remembered that NPCs are not reborn, which means he only has one life. Therefore, Stan needs to be patient for the sake of his future. The hero raised the pistol and began to try to hit, and Justin only laughed when he missed because his blade was already ready. The bloody teacher continued to inflict injuries, while the two figures watched the training. The mad scientist said that Justin doesn't appreciate such a good specimen one bit. It would be better if they gave it to him for research. Hell said that the organization would not agree to his demands, to which the doctor replied that when the organization sucks all the value out of the guy, they themselves will bring him on a platter. The training ended and a wounded, tired Stan returned to the room. Hell was sitting in the room wearing only a towel. She said that the guy showed himself badly today. Stan felt this judgmental atmosphere. He hoped that the girl would not punish him with a knife. The girl got up from the chair and called the guy to her. He thought that now she would punish him too. But Hell pointed to the warm bath and ordered the guy to undress. The guy didn't understand her words. Would they really take a bath together? After all, his mistress was going too far. The lady didn't like to wait and asked why the guy couldn't follow such simple orders. Stan obeyed. After he undressed, the girl came up and began to examine his body. The guy could hardly hold on. This is already a violation, and no one can resist such touches on the body. Hell exhaled in disappointment, saying that Stan looked like a coward. The guy had no choice but to stand and be silent. She took him by the hand and said that if he wants to live, then he needs to try. Otherwise, the organization will consider that they do not need him and will give him to Professor Hendrik for analysis and a brain autopsy. Stan thought that there wouldn't be any showdowns because a little more, and he would increase his levels, and in general, he was an experienced player. Suddenly, the girl pushed the hero in the chest. The guy couldn't keep his balance and immediately fell into the bathtub. Hell explained that this is a regenerating liquid. Zero should lie here for an hour, and all the wounds will heal by morning. Finally, she said that the hero should feel at home, and Stan, meanwhile, was disappointed, because he thought that they would take a bath together. Of course, he understood that a successful experiment does not mean that he will live his whole life. The embryo will continue to make new samples and conduct experiments. Stan understood that he had little time left. He needed to become stronger as quickly as possible. The next day, Professor Hendrik walked through the laboratory with Hell. He said that tomorrow he would go to management and ask for permission to dissect Zero. He did not think that he would be refused this time. Hell objected, saying that the organization had already rejected him last week. The professor should wait. The scientist did not understand why they needed this garbage, or the girl had already become accustomed to the sample, or maybe she even developed feelings for him. Hell cast a cold glance at the scientist, saying that this was impossible. Then Hendrik advised him not to mind his own business. He himself knows perfectly well what he should do. A little later, Hell was having dinner in her room. She told Stan to leave this gun alone. It was ruined, and it was better to throw it away. The guy still pretended to be dumb and incomprehensible, looking at the lady. The girl continued to say that you shouldn't treat him like your child. Unusable things are trash, and it's better to throw away trash. And if Stan can't grow up, he too will be thrown out like unnecessary trash. Suddenly, Zero began to speak his first words. He told the girl that he had fixed it. The guy realized that disassembling objects could bring him experience points. It's a pity there aren't so many of them. But if he gets even more mechanisms. Hell was surprised that the specimen was able to repair the gun. The next day, they left the bunker on the street. Mrs. Hell was holding a pistol in her hands. She wanted to check the functionality of the device. The nearby bushes began to move and the first targets appeared from them. Birds, which were immediately killed. Hell said that she informed the head about this. They gave permission to enter the armory. If the guy liked to delve into mechanisms and weapons, perhaps that's where he belongs. Stan thought that assembling and restoring mechanisms would allow him to earn experience, and this is what he was missing. He could only dream of the possibility of getting into the armory. Towards evening, the hero and his mistress arrived at the military weapons depot. The girl brought the guy and explained that this was the warehouse of the local base, and all their weapons were here. The guy was amazed by the embryo's combat training. There were a lot of weapons here. Stan was looking forward to gaining a huge amount of experience. The girl saw the guy's smile and said that she remembered that book on mechanization that Zero liked. So she found him some more of these books. The hero can read whenever he wants, but now she needs to go. After some time, the girl returned to her room and began to undress. However, Stan was already sitting in the room, which angered Hel. She was annoyed that he had returned here. The guy pretended that he didn't understand why his mistress was angry. The girl said that they had prepared a restroom for him in the armory, and now he would live and sleep there. Besides, he was a man, and it was inappropriate to live with her. She pointed to the door and ordered the guy to get lost. Stan was upset that his life together with the beauty ended so quickly. From this day on, he will study in the mornings in the training pavilion. Hel will be waiting for him there. Suddenly, she stopped him and handed him a pistol. She told the guy to take it for himself because he fixed it, and now he is his. After that, the girl wished good luck to the sample, and he went to the warehouse. The girl also turned around and walked towards her room. At that moment, the guy stopped. Hel turned around and asked the guy to survive. Our hero returned to the weapons ammunition depot and immediately began to study weapons. Every time he repaired or studied mechanisms, he gained experience points. Then the system offered to spend 200 experience points on the profession of a novice mechanic, and he agreed. Stan was happy that he was developing very quickly. In 2 days, he received the 3rd level. In order to get out of here, he would only need 6 months. By that time, no one will be able to stop the player here. So the weeks continued in the laboratory. Stan trained in the morning and studied mechanisms at night. Hel was disappointed that in 3 months this was all the guy achieved. However, he couldn't let them know what Stan had really achieved. The girl helped the hero get up and said that Professor Hendrik had contacted the leadership again to investigate him. Although the organization is in no hurry to make a decision, the guy will not be allowed to waste the organization's finances with such a worthless fortune. The girl asked Stan how long he thought he would last here. The hero looked at her thoughtfully. In principle, he assumed everything to be so. That same night, he also sat at his table with cutlery. The guy was constructing something using a soldering iron. He noticed that the organization had turned off the camera installed in that place, which meant that the embryo had decided that they no longer needed him, and they would not have to monitor him 24 hours a day. The guy bent down and pulled the heavy box closer to him. In the box was his pistol, which Hel gave him, only it had already been improved. Right now, dismantling mechanisms brings almost no experience. It's time to try strengthening objects. Now Stan has enough experience for such tricks. Although he improves items, they need to be returned to their previous form, and you cannot let them know about his skills. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door and Stan became alert. The guy immediately hid his pistol and spare parts for it. A red-haired guy entered the door along with his associates and said that the organization was disappointed in him, and starting today, funding had been reduced by 80%. The close said 001, which means this was the second specimen to survive after 0. The first number said that he heard that this guy is the same exemplar created before him. The organization spent a lot of resources on him. But instead of developing, he rummages around in this garbage. Red grabbed Stan by the collar and said that the guy was just a failed experiment. Putting number 1 in 0's place was the organization's best idea. Stan understood that this specimen had a completely cleared brain. The organization was his life. There was no point in interfering, otherwise the guy would give himself away. The first number ordered the other numbers and other workers to remove all of 0's equipment. This is what Valkyrie expected when creating the samples: fighting talent, strong body, and high learning speed. The best fighter. Meanwhile, 2 guards walked past the warehouse and looked inside. One of them told his friend to look at these useless insects. They experimented on these guys. Now they will be turned into cannon fodder, and they also erased their brains and completely turned them into obedient fighters. It's better to die than such a fate. The guard's partner advised him not to talk too much in front of them, but the other guard did not let up because there was absolutely no difference. After all, these insects have had their brains erased anyway, and they won't understand anything. Stan looked at the watching guards. He understood these glances. Each of the guards looked at them as if they were cattle. At that moment, number 1 approached the guy, who said that they were finished and said goodbye to the unsuccessful experiment. Stan was left alone, by the way. About the embryo, the samples here are just cannon fodder, a weapon. And now Stan wondered, when their own specimen destroyed them all, what kind of grimace would be on their faces. Meanwhile, the 3 faces training 0 stood in front of the screen reporting the entire situation to the boss. Professor Hendrik asked again about the autopsy, and this time the voice of management said that they would do as he asked. They would allow 0 to be autopsied. Finally, the scientist received approval. He bowed his head and thanked the owner. Justin, who was standing and sharpening his knife, only exhaled in disappointment. He was very sorry because this is such an interesting toy that he still hasn't played enough with. Hel, meanwhile, clenched her fist tightly. The moment had come that she didn't want, but there was nothing she could do. The next morning, she was still training Stan. The guy standing in a fighting stance noticed that something was wrong today. Hel powerfully hit the body. The guy noticed that the girl was too aggressive today. The girl shouted at him to defend himself and counterattack, and not stand like a pillar. But the guy was still just as confused. The lady jumped into the air to deliver the next attack. With one powerful blow, she knocked Stan over, and the guy didn't understand what he had done wrong that she was beating him so badly. Blood poured from his mouth and Hell continued to scream at him to attack her. Usually everything went much easier. The girl even allowed him to rest a little. But there was no way out. Stan's legs began to tremble, and he took a fighting stance. The guy accelerated and jumped on Hell to attack her. But the girl dodged it very easily, moving her head to the side. Then she abruptly took the guy's hand. Approaching him, she said that Zero's blows were too gentle. She threw the guy away, shouting that this did not look like awareness and the desire to survive. The force of the throw was powerful, causing the guy to roll a few more meters. But the girl did not calm down. She took him by the collar and prepared to strike. Stan opened his eyes. He understood that one more blow to him, and he would definitely die. However, Hell stopped abruptly, looking into his eyes. Then she just threw him to the ground, saying that it was funny, and she was sorry that she expected something from the guy. This is the end. Hell said that the guy should get a good sleep, and tomorrow he may not come here. The beaten Stan asked why he didn't have to come tomorrow. Hell turned around and began to leave. Leaving, he said that it was because the guy would be opened up tomorrow. Approaching the door, she quietly said that nothing could be changed. Nothing could be changed before the end. Now everything has become clear. This day has come. That's why Hell is so hot-tempered. She can't stand to see Hendrik picking the guy's head, so she beat him half to death. Women are so strange. Stan stood up with difficulty. During these 6 months, the only one who considered him a living being, a person, was Hell. Others saw him as a fool, cannon fodder, and a subject of experimentation. They mocked him, tormented him, because the prototype would not fight back. They believed that such behavior was in the order of things. But Stan remembered every drop of blood, and after all this, he will not die just like that. He returned to the warehouse and sat down to work on the development. This is all that he collected in 6 months, which flew by for him like a month of ordinary life, although he did not kill monsters or complete any tasks to raise the level. But he made up for raising the level in the limited realities of the mechanic class. Here he was able to gain a lot of experience while sitting in one room. Each character can master an unlimited number of professions, but every 20 levels a problematic task appears in order to continue raising the level you need to complete a special task. General level caps change with new updates, and in version 1.0 the max character level is 60, but Stan's screen says that his level is unlimited, meaning he has more power than any player. He is confident that the next stage is gambling blueprints. Blueprints are blue screens used in the mechanic class to create weapons and mechanisms. 60 types of knowledge can be used with each other to create a mechanism. Each combination contains many drawings, but after combining knowledge, only one direction of creation can be studied at a time. Some blueprints have prerequisites, so when merging knowledge, it is unknown how many blueprints you can get. But even when merging knowledge and experience, the player loses points in any case, because there is a possibility that another drawing will be created, which is why the stage is called gambling drawings. Stan performed his first merger and received a blueprint for a hang glider, which he threw in the trash. The next blueprint created was an artificial killer hand, but the guy considered this drawing useless. He needed something much more powerful. Stan was starting to get nervous because the experience points would soon run out, and he still hadn't received the required drawing. There was one more attempt left. The mechanic launched the system to create the last drawing. The system said that the merger was successful, and then Stan realized that this was what was needed. The guy created a lightweight exoskeleton that made him half robot. Now the leaders of the organization will learn what it means to cultivate their own enemy. A combat helicopter appeared above the laboratory and was already preparing to land. Hell, along with the first and other samples, were already waiting for the flying transport. The helicopter landed, and a squad of fighters came out. The team captain introduced himself to the girl and said that his call sign was Silverblade. The girl didn't bother for long and said that let them do what they were supposed to do. There was an SUV in the garage, and she would take the helicopter. There was no need to waste her time. Every 2 months, Hell leaves the base. Today, she left early in the morning. Now she is not at the base. If she were here, then Zero would have a hard time. But now the time has come. Stan prepared and endured all this time for this day. The day has come when the guy will get out of this prison. Professor Hendrik came for him. Today is the last and only chance. However, before going out into the corridor, the guy notices a strange piece of paper lying on the floor. He picked it up and saw a picture of 2 girls. This is Hell and her sister Aurora. She also has superpowers, only she is the complete opposite of Hell. She has very strong regenerative and healing skills. She is able to prolong life and, moreover, resurrect the dead. At the end of the game version 1.0, The embryo created a huge amount of essence from Aurora's body. This angered Hell so much that she began to destroy everything. At that moment, she was nicknamed the Goddess of Death. Suddenly, a system appeared in front of the hero, offering him a task, which stated that the embryo campaign is a bloody organization. No one knows where Hell came from. But whether she is loyal to the group is also not clear. The guy got a clue, and he should continue the investigation. The hero bowed his head, since the girl was relying on him this time. He will do something for her. After which the guy took on a task related to Hell. Suddenly he heard Hendrik's voice from the loudspeaker, ordering him to immediately report to the central hall for further orders. Stan put the clue in his pocket and decided that he would deal with Aurora when he got out of here. The guy looked around the corner and noticed a camera that was watching the entire perimeter. The hero knew that the entire base was under surveillance, and it was very difficult to move here unnoticed. If so, then the first thing you need to do is visit the control room. This is goal number 1. A couple of minutes later, Stan got inside and killed all the guards. Now the all-seeing eye has been eliminated, and Professor Hendrik is next in line. 20 minutes later, Zero was brought into the scientist's personal laboratory. The professor turned around and was delighted to see his precious specimen. By opening his body, he will be able to understand how the guy differs from other samples. And when he finds the reason, his corpse will become a stuffed animal in his laboratory. The professor began to prepare the instruments for the operation. The first sample brought back pleasant memories to him. However, Stan was already standing behind him and quickly dealt with the guard. Sensing something was wrong, Professor Hendrik turned around. He saw a dead guard. This was impossible. A specimen with cleared brains cannot kill their people. Stan, stained with the soldier's blood, put his hand to his head and smiled and saluted the doctor. Hendrik did not understand what had happened. There had been no problems for these 6 months. But the first significant problem suddenly appeared in Stan's hands. A knife that was intended for the scientist. Without any interference, the guy pierced the professor's chest. Hendrik was still stunned. Blood poured out of his body. The wounded scientist looked at the camera in the corner that was watching all this and told the guy that he would die. Stan told him that he had already killed everyone in the control room, so everything was fine. Professor Hendrik fell to his knees, choking on his own blood. In the last minutes of his life, he could not believe that the guy was just pretending all these 6 months. Stan confirmed his words by saying that reality is cruel. But Hendrik still insisted that this was impossible. The sample could not deceive everyone. Stan smiled. He raised his knife and said that nothing is impossible in this world. He then delivered another finishing blow to the professor, which cut his back. The mad scientist did not understand how this was possible. He was its creator. These were the last words of Professor Hendrik. The rebellious Stan stood and looked at the dying doctor. The first target eliminated. A couple of minutes later, the hero took off the clothes from the guard who brought him. He also took Hendrik's keycard. In the entire base, only 3 people have access to all the doors, and the professor was one of them. But the guy understood that if he went straight to the doors, he would definitely not be able to escape. The game would be over in 10 seconds. Stan couldn't screw this up. He put on his security guard's uniform and got ready to break in. His main plan is to break the connection. You need to achieve a couple of hours of freedom from communication. The communication equipment is located 3 floors below behind the wall. You will have to use mechanisms to break through the wall. Now you need to return to the 2nd floor for the mechanisms. There are several people at the base who may know him. Hell, number 1, Hendrik and Justin. The first 2 are not at the base, and the 3rd is dead. Others won't even notice him, but only if he meets Justin. Suddenly, someone put their hand on his shoulder and asked what group the guy was from. For some reason, he hadn't seen him before. It was Justin. Stan was unlucky to meet this freak so quickly. The hero lowered his cap and said that he was new from Group B. Justin didn't know that new people had been sent to them. It's strange why he didn't know, and the guy's voice was quite familiar. The deputy was not easy. He pulled out a gun and asked the guy to show his face. Stan squeezed his knife in his hand and asked him not to interfere because he didn't want to resort to Plan B. Justin didn't understand the guy's words and asked him what he meant. Stan turned around sharply and swung his knife, shouting that he had long wanted to tell Justin that it was time for him to check with a psychiatrist. The hero hit the deputy with a knife, but he managed to put his hand in front of him and protect his face. He was not so simple. Justin immediately realized that it was Zero. Other guards also did not stand aside. They opened fire on the enemy. Stan calculated the plan on the fly. In 2 seconds, he could reach the machinery room. It will take Justin 3.7 seconds to recover from the blow. 3 guards won't be able to harm him in 4.2 seconds. And help will arrive in 25 or 35 seconds. Stan ran into his room with lightning speed, where the improved mechanisms were hidden. Justin was surprised that the guy decided to hide in his room because this is the worst option for him. He approached the guy's room along with the guards, saying that the guy was too gentle. However, suddenly they felt a strange trembling. The tiles from the ceiling began to crumble little by little. The door to Stan's room opened. Justin was ready for any challenge. But inside the open door, he saw a core emitting pure energy. Stan jumped out of the door, and everyone who was in his way scattered in different directions. The guy was wearing a combat exoskeleton that covered 50% of his body. Justin didn't understand what kind of device was currently on Zero. And Stan was already approaching his sworn enemy. He told Justin that it was time to die. A powerful mechanical fist struck the laboratory deputy in the chest. Justin immediately felt this pain running like goosebumps all over his body. A mechanical blow pierced his chest. Justin did not believe that this was really happening. With a merciless look, Stan took Justin's heart with his mechanical hand. Then he simply tore the heart out of the shooting teacher's body. Such wounds cannot be healed. Another villain lay dead on the floor. The second target was eliminated. Over the course of 6 months, Justin stabbed Zero 420 times. The guy would like to hear how he felt when the deputy suffered punishment for his atrocities, but it's a pity he won't be able to answer. The guy left and security arrived seconds later to find the deputy dead. One of the guards tried to contact the control room, but the attempts were unsuccessful. Then he ordered a report to Dr. Hendrick. But the voice on the other end of the radio said that another group had discovered the dead body of Professor Hendrick. The units were ordered to find the enemy. Lethal fire was allowed. All groups must disperse and look for the attacker. The group that heard the order tried to enter the armory, but an explosion occurred from there. The guy on the other end of the radio was trying to contact them to find out what happened there and what that sound was. However, no one could answer him anymore. Suddenly, someone came up and lifted the radio. Stan said that part of Group C died from severe wounds. They blocked the target in the laboratory. The guys managed to shoot him. They urgently need to send help here. The voice on the other end of the radio said that the group was on its way and would arrive soon. After 20 seconds, the group arrived at the scene and began running inside. However, no one noticed the small rope that was stretched near the door. The rope led to the planted explosives, and right now someone touched it. Stan ran forward and heard an explosion behind him. His trap was a success. The guards on the floor below heard a strange roar and saw the walls shaking and stones falling. One of the guards asked on the radio what was happening upstairs, but there was no answer. He ordered his subordinates to stay here. The rest will go with him on reconnaissance. Suddenly, they saw someone opening the gate, but the strangest thing was that he could open the gate. Stan raised his cap and ran out of the gate and said goodbye to the guys who recognized him. Then the hero applied the keycard to the lock, and the doors closed again. The security tried to break through the gate, but everything was unsuccessful because they could not open it in any way without a keycard. Stan finally did it. He escaped from this gloomy laboratory in which he was abused. The guy rejoiced like a child and breathed in the clean air of freedom. Meanwhile, Hel was informed about what happened in the laboratory. She said that this was impossible, but the voice ordered her to return to the base. The girl asked about her sister, but the voice from the receiver told her that she had no right to bargain, and the call ended. At that moment, Hel realized that Zero had just been pretending all this time. Soon night fell, and our hero remained unnoticed. The squad pursuing Stan stopped because the car couldn't go any further. They decided to go on foot, knowing that the guy couldn't get far. One of the Falcon squad did not understand why they were sent for the sake of one sample. One got the feeling that they were not considered people. The commander answered him that the detachment had not had any assignments for a long time. This was an excellent reason to warm up. Then he gave the order to catch this dog, and the one who did it first would receive half a day of rest. The squad went in search, and Stan, meanwhile, was nearby. The guy was sitting behind a tree. He saw that 3 cars were following him. Under the cover of the night, it would be difficult to detect him. But suddenly, a large caliber bullet flew towards the guy with lightning speed. The bullet immediately pierced the tree behind which he was sitting, miraculously not hitting it. She slightly touched the exoskeleton. The guy realized that he had been discovered with the help of night vision devices. He needed to somehow reduce the distance to his pursuers. The guy ran and dodged bullets and thought about how he could get closer to the enemy, because the remaining experience points would need to be spent on close combat. Then he remembered one function of the exoskeleton. Stan pushed off and jumped towards the enemy. His speed was impressive, and he overtook the enemy in a split second. The sniper from the Falcon squad was surprised to see the guy in front of him. Realizing that the sniper rifle was useless in close combat, the soldier tried to pull out a pistol and shoot at the hero. But he was able to deftly dodge the bullet and hit him with his mechanical arm. The blow was so powerful that the soldier flew back and crashed into the wall. His ribs were broken, and he died on the spot. The system reported that Stan earned 1,500 points for killing a soldier from the Falcon Special Squad, and he also received 3 hand grenades for this. A special squad that discovered the enemy opened fire to kill. Stan dodged and immediately decided to take advantage of his new acquisition by throwing a grenade at the enemy. An explosion occurred, and the fighters who attacked the guy were immediately defeated. The system reported that the guy destroyed 2 more fighters and received 3,000 points for this. Other members of the squad decided to throw a grenade at the hero to blow him up on the spot. Another explosion thundered, but this time from the direction of the forest where Stan was standing. When the smoke cleared, they came closer to see if the target was hit, and it seemed they succeeded. But that wasn't the end. Stan pulled his robotic arm out from behind the tree and fired it at his enemies. The commander shouted to the squad to go to cover, but they could no longer move from their wounds. Stan, sitting behind a tree, was happy that he had destroyed 3 more fighters. The commander could hardly contain his anger because the guy was just an ordinary exemplar. But this ordinary sample, which was easily dealt with by the entire commander's detachment. The leader pulled out his knife and walked towards Stan. The guy killed the wrong people today. Stan, meanwhile, was checking the system. There was almost no armor, no ammunition either. His strength would soon run out. This battle needed to be ended as soon as possible. Suddenly, he heard footsteps and saw the last surviving fighter approaching him. The commander waved his knife and jumped at the hero, but Stan dodged in time by crouching. Then he placed his robotic leg on the tree and pushed off. The guy easily managed to knock down a powerful opponent to the ground. Nobody wanted to retreat. The guys continued to fight lying on the ground. The commander then placed his foot on Stan's chest and pushed him away from him. The hero barely got to his feet. Leaning against a tree, he realized that it was hard to fight with the commander. The commander said that because he underestimated Stan, his guys died, so he will not be able to live peacefully in this world. But before that, he must send this sample to hell with his own hands. The commander of the Falcon Squad accelerated and again jumped at the exhausted Stan, waving his knife. The guy had no choice but to put a block with his robotic arm, into which the knife entered. The mechanism began to spark, and the knife stuck tightly in his hand. The commander pulled the knife and tried to pull it out of Stan's mechanism, but to no avail. Taking advantage of the pause, Stan punched the man in the face. The fighter fell to the ground along with the severed part of Stan's mechanical arm. Nevertheless, the mechanical arm beat very powerfully, and the resulting damage caused damage to the captain's brain, and he died. However, Stan's exoskeleton completely collapsed, but he still has a drawing, and when he has the material, he will be able to create a new one. Embryo's help will arrive soon. We need to leave. This forest looks vast, and Stan didn't know where to go. First, you need to find the place where people live, create a map, and move on. A few days later, a meeting was held at the main embryo base, at which the head scolded people for the fact that just one sample was able to kill 30 armed guards, destroy the laboratory data, kill a special squad, and also take the life of Hendrik. In the end, he still managed to escape unharmed. The leader did not want to listen to all these fairy tales. The subordinate said that the Valkyrie serum introduced into the body of Sample Zero led to side effects that they could not predict. He received a talent for mechanization and an incredibly high level of intelligence. The leader guessed that the brain cleaning did not affect him, and the frightened subordinate confirmed his words. The Zero sample did not show any anomalies for the first 6 months. Perhaps he was pretending, but in fact he was developing an escape plan. Hell said that she knew Zero's fighting power. He could not have become strong so quickly. The girl suggested that the guy had awakened special abilities in himself. The leader ordered them to shut up. He does not want to listen to any excuses until they completely eradicate the abnormalities of the serum. No more samples are produced, and besides, the brains of all other samples need to be cleaned again. The first number who listened to all this became angry because the leader questioned his loyalty to the organization. He came forward and said that he was ready with his guys to lead a squad to destroy Zero. The leader slowly lit a cigarette and agreed to this proposal. He ordered that Zero be found and returned to the base, dead or alive. Meanwhile, morning came on the wasteland. In the distance, one could see the fire from the fire on which Stan was roasting a fragrant chicken. He had already spent 7 days in this forest. Food and water were running out, but at least his wounds weren't inflamed. Apparently, a lot of points and endurance were making themselves felt. The guy didn't know when he would get out of this thicket. He needed to quickly get to people and get himself in order. The hero had dinner, collected his things, and moved on. But on the way, he touched a strange rope. Stan immediately felt that he had stepped on something and braced himself. Instantly, a net fell on the guy. It was a prepared trap. Stan got caught. The man put the gun barrel to the guy's face and ordered him not to move. The unknown hunter demanded that all valuables be taken out of their pockets and immediately given to him. Stan realized that this was a simple thief, and meanwhile the man began shouting for him to move. But our hero suddenly grabbed him by the throat and punched him in the stomach. The thief fell to his knees and began to beg the master, saying that he did not see a good fighter in him. Stan asked why he decided to confess only now. Its barrel was crooked. If you shoot from it, the thief will shoot himself in the face. The man raised his head and shouted that he was to blame. Stan looked at the guy and asked what was his fault. The man did not know what to answer. He said that he should have acted differently. It was necessary to take a second gun. Stan laughed at these words and put the weapon to the man's head. The thief turned around and said that if the gentleman is not angry, he will crawl further. This is what he does best. But Stan was not going to let the guy go just like that. He wanted to know where the nearest city was. In tears, the thief said that there was a town nearby, 1 kilometer to the east, where all sorts of vagabonds gathered. Then the thief begged to let him go, but Stan raised his fist, and the guy prepared to get hit in the head. But suddenly the hero took 2 fingers and lightly hit the blockhead on the head. A lump grew at the sight of the blow, and Stan said with a smile that he was not that strong, and now let him fail and not do such things again. A couple of hours later, Stan reached a small camp of tramps. He walked past a car in which a bald, bearded man was sitting. The man immediately jumped out of the car and asked to look at his product. Today, there is a sale of high-quality products. You can also exchange barter without cheating. This proposal interested Stan because he did not have any money with him, but there was something to exchange for. He said that he needed a map, 3 buckets of water, and 5 kilograms of food. Since there was no money, Stan handed over 7 cartridges and said that he could pay with this. The seller saw the bullets, a very valuable thing in this day and age. He smiled and said that these bullets weren't enough for him to do everything. He wanted 150 rounds for all this. Stan said that the merchant was inflating the price, but he laughed because he could do this due to the fact that there is not a single camp within a radius of 50 kilometers. Suddenly, someone hit the insolent merchant on the head with a smoking pipe. A man named Carl appeared and told the bald man that one should not deceive the people. It was already difficult for people to live in the local forests. The merchant was angry that such a deal had been thwarted, but did not argue with the leader. Carl explained to Stan that this guy is a local speculator and should not do business with him. He realized that the hero had been wandering in the forest for a long time, so he offered to stay in his tent today, where there was a warm bed and food. Stan accepted the offer. He thought that this guy doesn't look like a scoundrel, and even if he is, he's not afraid of him now. The hero and Carl turned around and went to his tent. In the small dwelling was the man's wife, whom he introduced him to. The girl greeted the guy by saying that she didn't know what to cook and made her own homemade food. The table was set in a festive way. There was baked duck, bread, and various drinks. Stan began to drool at the sight of such dishes because he had not eaten for 3 days. He began to eat the food, and his health became better and better with each bite. A little later, Stan asked the man about the excellent gun that was hanging on the wall. Carl replied that he had served before, and this gun protected him for many years, and therefore he kept it in excellent condition. However, now he is too old and does not think that it will be useful anymore. His homeland was absorbed by a large country after the truce. The embryo collaborated with 6 states and supplied them with weapons, making the wars bloodier. But what Carl definitely doesn't want is to fight again. He likes the calm, measured life that he has now. After talking, the heroes went to bed, and early in the morning Stan got up to leave. Stan noticed the thief and asked Carl if it was his son. He replied that it was just his nephew, whose parents died in the war. The hero told Carl that yesterday this guy returned late, and that's why he sent him to sleep in the car. After saying goodbye again, Stan left the camp. He hoped to meet Carl again. Carl also hoped to drink a bottle next time, and the residents of the small town watched the hero go. A few hours later, combat vehicles appeared in the surrounding area. The subordinate reported that this was the only camp within a 50-kilometer radius. Apparently Zero was here. Carl and the merchant were carrying boxes of supplies when suddenly they were called out. The first number stood in front of them together with the embryo fighters. He asked if they had seen this guy and showed them a photo of Stan. Carl, who came to the defense of the town, replied that they had not seen him. The first number got angry when he realized that they had gone in the wrong direction and ordered his soldiers to get ready to leave. But then the first number noticed one very strange detail. One of the guys with purple hair stood and pounded as if he was afraid of something. The first number ordered his fighters to take this guy. He also added that they should search him as quickly as possible. The embryo fighters grabbed the guy and forced him to his knees, while number 1 examined him. Suddenly, he finds a pistol in the guy's jacket. The first number knew him. This is the gun that Zero stole from the Night Falcons. If he didn't come here, then where did this guy get his weapon? He pointed the gun at the guy's head and asked where he got it from. There was no point in hiding it anymore. If the thief does not tell, then everyone standing here will die. The merchant panicked and told Carl that it was he who was hiding the guy in his tent. If you tell people about the guy, no one wants problems because of him. The first number pointed a gun at Carl and ordered him to tell everything he knows, and there is no need to deny that Zero was here. Carl had no choice but to point in the direction where Zero went. The first number smiled and said that they should have told everything right away, but he should pay for the fact that he almost fooled him around his finger, after which shots were fired. Meanwhile, Stan had already gone far and was sitting resting on a stone. The guy had a strange feeling. His eye twitched. It seemed to the guy that someone was touching his backpack. There was all the equipment from the embryo. If at least something was left in the camp, then people would be in trouble. 11 rifles were in place, 300 rounds of ammunition too, but 10 pistols were missing. One was missing. Now it's clear why Carl's nephew was so strange. He stole his pistol. An hour passed, and our hero arrived at the camp where he had been earlier. But it was already too late. The bloody bodies of all the inhabitants of the camp lay in front of him. Realizing that they were killed because of him, the guy was horrified. His fist clenched out of anger. He wanted to be on time, but he was late. Stan turned around and was about to leave when suddenly someone grabbed his leg. The surviving merchant, sobbing, said that it was Embryo's detachment. They did not surrender him, so they killed everyone. On behalf of Carl and his hospitality, the man asked to avenge them. Stan stood and was silent. He realized his guilt. Suddenly, the guy heard another voice. It was Carl's nephew, who asked not to trust the merchant because it was he who betrayed his uncle. And his uncle, until his last breath, he didn't tell them where Stan was going. The guy stood next to the corpse of a once hospitable man, whom he wanted to see later, but not in such an environment. Stan fell to his knees. Carl, even dead, pointed in the opposite direction to where he was heading. The hero took off his jacket and covered the man's corpse with it. The nasty merchant realized the situation he found himself in and began to beg. He crawled away and asked to wait a little, and he would explain everything, but Stan was already reloading the gun. The hero, overwhelmed with pain, said that until his death, Carl did not betray him, whose boyfriend he had known for less than 2 days. A real man died because of such a pathetic worm as this vile merchant. Stan pointed his gun and said that he could apologize to Carl in the next world. A shot rang out, and one person responsible for the death of the camp died. Stan knew that the path that Carl pointed to led to nowhere, which meant that they would soon go in the opposite direction, so they should set up an ambush here. Entering Carl's former house, the guy noticed something interesting. The man's gun, and at that moment, a system window appeared in front of him, which activated the revenge task. His task is to destroy the sample squad, and the reward is 15,000 experience points. The guy threw all the weapons he had onto the floor from his backpack. It was time for preparation. Stan used his mechanic skills and dismantled the old weapons to assemble one, improved one from Carl's old weapon. He improved the man's hunting rifle and made it into a sniper rifle. Stan will make the offenders feel sorry for the attack. By evening, the combat vehicles had already begun to return. The guy was waiting in ambush. He noticed the approach of the enemy. The first number realized that the guy was not here, which means he was in the other direction. Stan shot at the tire of the combat vehicle, and it immediately burst due to damage. The first number asked the driver what happened. He replied that most likely the tire had exploded. But the first number was not stupid. He knew that a low-pressure tire could not explode. Most likely it was an attack. He ordered everyone to bend down and follow the armored vehicles. As soon as they approached the target, everyone needed to transfer to jeeps. Stan watched the cars drive away in the opposite direction and smiled because he knew that the first example would do this. At the same second, the mines went off and the asphalt under the armored vehicles exploded. The wounded soldiers climbed out of the overturned equipment, coughing from the smoke they had inhaled. But then bullets began to fly at them, killing the squad one by one. The first number managed to dodge in time, jumping over a nearby stone. He shouted at the attacker to show his face and not hide like a coward. But Stan didn't hide. He went out to the first number, and he immediately recognized Zero's face. The guy insisted that this was impossible, because he was a weakling and could not destroy an entire detachment of special soldiers. Stan smiled and replied that he had already heard this phrase somewhere. However, the one who said it last time is already lying 2 meters underground. Suddenly, a voice from number one's radio asked Stan to stop. A hologram of a man appeared from the radio, who said that he was the head of the embryo organization. He asked to return to the base, and then the leader would guarantee the guy that his memories would be preserved, and he would receive a high rank and would not be a model. Stan asked why the head decided that he would work for them, and the leader replied that their organization is already all over the world. They are doing great things, and working for them is natural. But if he refuses, then the world for Zero will no longer be so big and safe. The guy smiled and told the leader of the embryo organization that he would destroy them. Then he aimed his sniper rifle at the first number and pierced his chest with a powerful shot. All the people responsible for the death of the residents were killed. The system reported that the guy killed the first sample and received 900 points, and the task called Revenge was completed. Stan understood that his current strength was nothing compared to the strength of the organization. He would have to rely on his knowledge and unite with a force capable of resisting the entire organization. The guy left the rifle next to the tree under which he buried Carl and went to the Star Dragon Empire.